very recent research into trauma and discovering how amazing Adler was, and so many of his principles and practice actually fit with what's going on now. So what this lecture, that I hope, please just come in, because it's much more fun to have a dialogue. So this bit, but then after that we'll be very much doing little exercises, I'll be doing a few demos, you know, and so on some fundamental principles. But, so it's slightly different than from a normal training I might do, because I'm going to attempt in about 50 minutes, do some more chalk and talk, if you like, but I try and put all the principles into one package, and then we'll use that as a base. But remember my sincere wish that if you want to stand up, move about, go and get a glass of water, I really invite you to do so during that time. So this is just going to be a little bit more, let's say, slightly more formal. And I mean, let's go, all of you very well-versed Adlerians, what would you say is at the heart of being human? Just go for it. Yeah, what is it? Connection. Connection. Yeah. Let's go for it. Oh, does it work? Oh, no, it doesn't. Did I do that? Oh, no, I should do this one. Yay! Okay. Social embeddedness. You know, so here we are. I mean, absolutely. Our fundamental need for connection, for belonging. I mean, as Eva Ferguson said, and drawing from Adler, that all our human problems are social problems. And I love the optimism of individual psychology, with its Gemeinschaftsgefühl, with its community feeling, you know, with that potential for all of us, for mental health and resilience. And I hold that very dear in the work I'm doing with people with deep traumatic experiences, that there is a way through, that there is that potential. You know, there it is, forming a foundation for mental health. But we also know, and that's kind of a very superficial thing in terms of the kid with the homework, but of course, children face much more demanding tasks. But here we need, for the frame of trauma therapy, there's just a need for all of us to have that subjective sense of being a social equal. Which in turn enables us to meet what Adler called the tasks of life. That of occupation, friendship and community, and intimacy. So to help us meet those in a positive way. Now let's explore a little bit now some of the definitions of trauma. You will, and you'll note that I'm going to go to less medicalized definitions initially. And I love Judith Herman. Judith Herman's book, Trauma and Recovery. You know this book? I would say it's a seminal work. I really recommend you read it if you haven't done so. I mean, look what she says. She's not Adlerian, but she says events that overwhelm the ordinary systems of care. That give people a sense, as Bonnie was saying, connection, control, and meaning. We move into that sort of existential aspect of the Adlerian approach, which is interesting. And then O'Connell and Hooker, who are two Adlerians, a definition that they wrote, being faced with experiences that have shattered, absolutely shattered, that sense of personal identity, worth, and belonging. So it's a much more, for me, existential sort of aspect there. Let's just move that on. Now, or perhaps we'll just stay with this. Trauma, I mean, I'm stating obviously it can be a single event, it can be a series of events, or Janina Fisher, somebody I really appreciate her work, done some training with. It can be about a system of enduring conditions. And that's the kind of drip, 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 those enduring conditions that can't be neatly defined. I'll be coming to DSM in a minute, and we'll get a little bit of my opinion about that. But, you know, the chronic childhood neglect and abuse and domestic violence. In addition, war, racial and cultural oppression and modern-day slavery, I mean, in Cambridge, you know, they found slaves and trafficked women right there under our noses. You know, it's tragically right there. I mean, are just some of these further painful examples. So, and sometimes a traumatic event may not be neatly defined as life-threatening, but very much about our subjective experience of a threat to life, or a threat to our psychological integrity. Now, here's just some examples. A type 1 of a single shock trauma. You know, many of you may have worked with these kind of people. There was Steve who came to see me, and he was a bank cashier. And I just want to clarify, I've anonymized all the cases except for one of a client who absolutely wanted, part of his lifestyle you could argue, wanted to be brought into the training. Okay. And he positively recovered from an armed robbery where he was held up at gunpoint. And he described his first early experience, that the world, in his words, the world had shattered in 1,000 pieces. Nothing seemed to make sense anymore. And despite family being around, and I think that's the interesting, again, Bonnie's connection, I felt totally isolated. It's this intriguing thing of that kind of sense of isolation. Now here's Alicia, who I saw, and we can look at much more in terms of complex developmental trauma and enduring conditions. I mean, a history of chronic childhood neglect and sexual and emotional abuse. And her private logic sort of revealing a loss of personal worth and belonging. And she created the following conclusions. Okay, we create our lifestyle, but we can understand. So I'm not just taking a deterministic view, but at the same time really appreciating the enduring stuff. I exist to be used. I don't have rights, only duties. Others have all the power. Therefore, of course, I have to give in to others' demands. That was her unique view. And I mean, this private logic identifies her safeguarding strategies. And let's just have a quick look at Adler's notion of inferiority and safeguarding. And I think Alicia and Steve experienced severe threats to their physical and their psychological integrity. And in Adlerian terms, they perceived an ultimate experience of inferiority, from which we all work so hard to maintain our well-being. And by what Adler, I think, very, very crucially called an oversized safeguarding component. So again, safeguarding, a term well known by Adlerians, but here note the difference, the safeguarding aspect, different from defense mechanisms, but for me have a kind of pathological slant to them. It's the safeguarding. I'm doing my darndest, trying to safeguard myself. So let's just move on. I mean, any thoughts? We can have a break if you like, just with any reflections. John?
Tease out a little bit more for me. Defense mechanism, safeguarding. Say a little bit more.
Right. I mean, yeah, we could. You know what all trainers do? If you think, oh gosh, do I know the answer? You throw it out to the group. I will attempt to. I mean, I'm going to be looking at safeguarding more, but safeguarding, I'm going to be exploring as something that I am needing to safeguard myself from a loss of self-esteem, from a loss of annihilation, from a loss of a kind of existential void. Defense mechanisms for me, from my understanding in terms of psychoanalytic literature, would mean that I am kind of resisting. I'm resisting. I'm kind of in my resistance. I'm kind of challenging. I'm resisting you, rather than actually, for me, and I'm going to be looking at this a lot more, the whole safeguarding thing, is actually we can start having a deep compassion and understanding of how a person is moving into a kind of attempting to keep themselves safe. They're doing it in a wonky way. They're doing it in a private logic way. But it kind of can help us really appreciate that even though it's a wonky way, that we can start from that, start to see it in terms of that's at the moment an advantage to the person, even though it seems rather weird. And I was coming to that. But John, please let me have your thoughts on that.
And I was working when you tossed it out there. I was trying to figure out how I would compare one or contrast to the other. So yeah, I was really working on that. But your imagery there does help me tease it out a little bit more.
Okay, well thanks for the question. Appreciate that. So